Hey, Candida.
We're in the same room.
Yes. Yeah. An in-person session of Mental Health Goes to School.
Yep.
I'm on school break, and I came down to visit Candida from Massachusetts to New York.
Yep.
We've just been talking constantly.
And some about this, some about everything else.
Right, exactly.
We've had great weather. I mean,
yes,
it's just been spectacular.
Sitting out in the backyard under the cherry tree, drinking coffee.
Cherry blossoms. We got here just in time.
Right, exactly.
Pop. And we've had almost all of our meals out in my backyard.
Yeah, and watch the birds flying around. The cardinals are looking for a place to nest.
No.
The carpenter bees may have found a place.
Because they were busy yesterday and they were gone.
These guys are gigantic.
Huge.
Yeah. Jax was suggesting you put a geo tracker on them. You could, if you could catch them. Those guys
are just put a little pat on them. They're like, I don't know, how big are they like that?
They're like, a couple inches.
They're big.
It's like, and it's one of those things. How do they even fly? I don't know.
Yeah.
But yes, enjoying nature.
Yeah, very much.
Springtime.
So. Yeah. So I'm just hanging out, and and we've done some work on this, trying to sort of evolve the podcast a little bit. So as you can see, we're here. Not only are we together, but we're actually going to try to do this for video. Like usually, we haven't done that yet. We've been only focused on the audio. So we're going to try to begin to put in some a video component, and so this is kind of our first pass. And so just to reintroduce, remember, I'm Candida Fink, child psychiatrist.
And I'm Joanne Berry, special educator.
And this is Mental Health Goes to School. And today we're going to talk about...
there was an article recently in the New York Times, April 13th, actually, 2025.
Okay.
Have we been thinking about ADHD all wrong?
Yeah.
The writer of the article is Paul Tough. I think I've said that correctly. It's spelled Tough.
Okay.
And we both thought this was kind of interesting just to think about, since both of us work with people who
ADHD,
have attention deficit.
Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So we'll start with a few definitions, I think is good. Because ADHD, that is the technical diagnosis in the DSM-5. There is no such thing as ADD, right? So there used to be split as attention deficit disorder and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, but it is now only ADHD technically. And then that is subdivided into predominantly inattentive presentation, predominantly hyperactive impulsive, or combination. And I would say the vast majority I have are either inattentive or combined. The vast majority of young people I work with, kids I work with, the only hyperactive impulsive is much less frequently diagnosed.
Right. And since I'd agree, that's probably what I see amongst our students. And it could be that somebody who is only hyperactive would not be a good fit for our school. Right. So I wouldn't see them anyway. Yeah. But
can I just say one other thing?
Yes.
So diagnostically, and I think, the article, I sort of held my breath before I read it, because articles that say things, sort of dramatic things like that about psychiatric diagnoses, I always kind of go, what are you going to say? Is this all right? Is it going to be helpful, or is it going to, be more stigmatizing? And I will say that I think the vast majority of child psychiatrists, psychologists, people working in the field now would tell you that we would like very much for the diagnosis to be changed from a deficit to dysregulation, right? So that the challenges are in regulation of attention, not a frank deficit. Because people with ADHD can pay attention, many, not all. People at the higher severity or, end of the spectrum may not. But for the vast majority, they can pay attention to things that are interesting, exciting.
Right.
That has an emotional kick. A concert, a video game, something that's very stimulating to the brain, and just
something that they love, interested in.
Might be building Legos for a little kid, or even a teenager. Might be reading. I mean, it's interesting because reading is often very, very challenging for kids with ADHD, but it's primarily the reading that is boring or difficult. right?
Right,
That's the hard
but
part.
reading what they want to read, which
And that
I mean is true for a lot of people.
And hyperfocus is the other end of it. The difficulty with disconnecting from something that you are super focused on is a big problem at the other end. So, but that is still can come as part of ADHD. So really, I think even within the field, as much as they're sort of saying, well, the field is wrong and here's the research, I think functionally we are much more aware of it being a dysregulation issue.
Right, right. But interestingly, from the article, it's noting the increase in diagnosis. Now that, just like with so many other things, it's like, is it because there's better awareness?
Mm-hmm.
Is it because we're more willing to apply a diagnosis to a situation that a child or young adult is experiencing? Or are there, in fact, more cases, more people experiencing this?
Right.
Exactly. And of course, if you think about how much the world has changed in the last 40 or 50 years, any or all of those things might be true.
Might be a part of it, and for sure. And I think, my answer to that question, people ask, as a child psychiatrist, I get that question all the time. Do you think it's underdiagnosed? Do you think it's overdiagnosed? And my answer is usually that I do think there's overdiagnosis. I think unfortunately, there are situations in which there are these rapid fire diagnoses that are all about just getting medications. And, especially in the pandemic, those kind of exploded, but they existed before. And, sort of poorly, not well established full evaluations and, a quick label and medication prescription. So that absolutely is a thing that happens. But there are also kids I meet, especially young women, but not entirely, who get to 10th, 11th grade, and they have clearly been struggling, particularly with attentive presentation, and have never been picked up. And, again, not that means they need medication. Sometimes they do, but that the identification of may have been very helpful to them in terms of how they might have changed how they study or what they do or what services we might have provided in schools. So it is still very much missed in I think particularly some subpopulations. But there is this whole wave of, overdiagnosis, which,
Right. Well, yeah, my kid or I am having a problem in school. Maybe I have ADHD. Get a diagnosis, start taking the meds, and it does help, maybe.
Right. It'll help anybody. It helps anybody focus. It is not unique to ADHD.
Which one of the interesting quotes from this article was a college student who said, it's still boring, but you're interested in it enough. Wait, let me find the exact quote. On Adderall, so the quote is, you're interested in what you're doing, even if it's boring.
Right.
So does help focus, which, I mean, we all know if something is boring to us, it's more difficult. But if you're at that edge, where you really cannot pay attention and you want a high school diploma or a college degree or to pass, a qualification exam for anything, for driving, for whatever, that it could help. And one of the points made in the article was, if we look at it more as a tool rather than a cure, the brain isn't broken. It's working in a different way, which makes it difficult perhaps to be successful in school. Then if you can think of it as a tool to help focus in school and get done what you need to get done, even if it is boring, and then move on to the next part of your life, which I see high school age kids. A lot of times it just seems when we hear back from them, once they are doing what they want to do, whether that's they're taking classes in college that they're interested in after they get the gen eds done, but they don't have to take that stupid blah 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 class, whatever, whichever one they don't like, and they're on to the things that they're interested, or they're working in something that they enjoy, then it's much less of a problem because they're not bored and they want to do well. Not that they didn't want to do well before, but
well, they may have given. I mean, there's a whole spectrum of things that happen, with kids who struggle when they're their brains learn differently, on this particular spectrum of attention and executive function, but we're shoehorning them into school and we're trying to get them through, and they may want to learn at some point, but they may often give up or become hopeless about it. I mean, that's the downward spiral that we see. And so yes, a tool for certain circumstances at certain points. And I always say, though, well, a few things I think are important to say. One is we never medicate for the grownups in the room.
Right.
We never medicate to make a kid more manageable, period. This is always, should be, if medication is to be used, it is about the child being able to feel better, function better, do better in ways that will be helpful to them.
Right.
This is not about quieting a kid. That is an inappropriate use of medication, and we start from there. And it's not the only tool. It's so important. And I write the article, I know, speaks a lot about the idea of fit, right? That having a different brain means you learn differently, you need different ways of getting information, whatever. And they make the point, it's like, well, we shouldn't use medication, it should be environmental change. That sounds really easy. Like it makes it sound easy, but it is not easy at all. Even for kids with significant attentional issues, trying to get academic resources, even in well-supported and subsidized school districts, making change can be very hard.
Exactly. But perhaps by changing your frame of your lenses, your frame of how you're looking at this problem, if it is a problem in your classroom or with your child, if you're a parent, there could be some ways that could be doable within the constraints of a public school environment. And some things that I am thinking of that I know many of my students use are the sound canceling headphones, because they're distracted by just noise in general, or they might be distracted by other people's side conversations. And that allows them to focus. Sometimes it's just having the headphones on to block out. They might be actual sound canceling, or they might just be enough to muffle the sound. And then some students do well, they tell me they do well, and I cannot argue with them, if while they're reading to themselves, if they have music in their headphones, that helps them focus. I think what it does is, I don't know how else to explain it, but takes up or soaks up that part of the brain that would be distracted or distracting to them, so that they can focus on what they're reading. So those work well in the high school environment, perhaps for younger students as well. And there could be opportunities for students to kind of like turn away from the rest of the group. And it depends on your classroom setup and what you're, but like in younger grades, I know they often have stations around the room. So there could be a station set up that kind of allows a student to isolate a little bit. That could be helpful.
I think some things that are sometimes a little more controversial, and as an educator, you probably would have some feelings about this, but things that some people, that we do for some kids, things like extended time on exams, sometimes flexible timing on submission of projects, not no deadlines, but flexible timing. There are some people who basically, function as no deadlines. That's like at the very end, very extreme end. But the idea of flexibility in deadlines or extended time on exams, that putting that out for everyone in the classroom rather than making it an accommodation. I'm not saying that's accurate or okay, and I think you would probably disagree with most of that, but there are some people, I have read and encountered some educators, in the space that feel like just having that as for the whole room catches the kids who aren't diagnosed, and sort of works, and then everyone gets the benefit of using it. Plenty of kids won't need it and won't use it. It was interesting. Again, I know that's like more extreme.
So I know in the public high school, you're supposed to follow a curriculum and be at a certain point at a certain date, blah, blah, blah. So that would be a little more difficult. But maybe you need to adjust assignments. And with Google Classroom, and I'm sure there are other similar systems, you can assign stuff individually to students. So say you've got 3 students in your room who need the extra time, give them one less question, a few less,
without
a little bit less,
without a whole IEP,
that you could still get the information you need to evaluate whether they got the material. That would be one thing you could do.
I see.
And when I give, because a lot of our students do have extra time as an accommodation. My general thing is you will have the time you need.
Right.
I'm going to give you in class till this date. I will take it until this date, but we're not going to work it in class after this
That
time.
makes sense.
And extra time does not mean infinite time. And if it's something early in the term, if you come to me the next to last day of the term and say, here it is, I'm not going to be very happy. Because there is some learning around responsibility that has to happen.
Right. That you're trying to continue and to ask for help, right? To keep you, the process of communicating about it is part of it, even if it's not like, here, I produced this, but helping the student learn to communicate about it.
And often I'll say, turn in what you have on this date. Better, what were
better done than good. Or we can come back to that.
And then there's better good than perfect, which can be a thing
right. That's for the anxious kids.
But if I want you to turn it in before we get into the next unit, so this isn't hanging over you, and you can focus on what we're doing next. And most students will agree with that. And I very often get the whole thing, like when they're like, oh yeah, I can do that. And even if they can't, and they get 3/4 of it done, I will grade you on what you've done if I feel that you've actually been working on it and not just messing around.
Right.
Or if you've been sick and this is,
what you could do.
Yeah, exactly. So I know, like I said, in the big public, sometimes this is less easy to do, but just thinking around, like, what would make sense for a good chunk of the student population? Would another day to do a thing be better, or maybe I should look at the assignment and see if there's some adjustments?
Right. Some flexibility, I guess, is a big part of that story, and that's going to be individual for student, teacher, subject, right? But the idea of flexibility rather than the rigidity that is sort of baked into the is baked into the system as it exists now.
Right.
And I think that, to me, that's the little bit frustrating thing, or kind of a lot frustrating thing about sort of what I perceive as somewhat facile comments like change the environment. Okay, say that. And I'm not saying we should medicate a kid, but if a child has extreme difficulty focusing or paying attention or sitting still, and that is the demand, and there is not the room to just sort of magically create a different sort of resource for them, or a different setting, then, that is, medication will become a part of that. It's a tool. I mean, that's ultimately what this is talking about. And I don't disagree at all with this idea that it's one tool in the toolbox. We don't see this as a single disorder or medical disorder. Complex level of supports, parent education, parent coaching, parent training, teacher education. Right. It's like educational flexibility. Like, there's just so much that goes into it that is not medication based, but there's absolutely a role for medication. And other two things I just want to say, besides academics, and we don't have to stay too long on this, but besides academics, there are two things that they didn't really talk about. One is the social pressures and difficulties that come for kids with notable ADHD, because they're even just inattentive, they're missing conversation, even, they're missing social cues, they're missing opportunities to develop. They are sometimes really seen as different, and they get bullied. I mean, there is so much socially that can spiral, and that is not going to get picked up in these assessments of long-term learning,
right? Yeah.
Where they say, oh, it doesn't have long-term benefits. Almost every child psychiatrist I talk to says, I don't believe those. Those studies make no sense to me, because kids we know have thrived in ways they could not without using that tool. And I think most of the people in the article, most of the resources in the article agreed with that it's very beneficial for some kids, and that is not detected in the studies that are done so far.
Right.
And safety. Driving for teenagers, young drivers with significant ADHD, we know they have more fender benders, and it's better with meds. Even safety things like, leaving the stove on.
Right.
Forgetting to do other important safety issues. Like, there is walking across the street without paying attention. I mean, we know they have a higher risk of of injury and harm. Accidental injury and harm is higher in people with ADHD. So again, to label it as just an academic disorder is also not
right. Yes. And I do see it. There are some students, and it depends on the rest of their personality and how they built friendships, in general,
right.
when
Yes.
consistently you see a kid come in 5 minutes into the conversation and all the other kids are like, we're done with that. We already talked
Right,
about
we were
that.
done.
And sometimes it's goofy and it's a joke, and then sometimes it's irritating.
Yeah.
So it depends on the situation and the people involved. And if there's a kid who's kind of like, people are willing to give them a chance, but then they keep
Right.
not,
They can't change it. They can't change their behavior.
And they don't have what the group sees as other redeeming qualities, then they're out.
Right.
But if they're otherwise liked and have
something else,
something for whatever reason, then people will overlook it. They might get a little tired of it, but so it could go either way. And if you're seeing a kid struggle with that, then maybe, the meds would be helpful.
That is life changing,
right?
Because then you get tracked and labeled from third grade, kindergarten, even on.
Right.
And that's a tough thing to start to undo.
Right. Especially when you're with the same population through K to 12, which a lot of people are, or kind of the same group and are well known.
Yeah, and I will also say too, just again, an entirely separate topic that we would want to bring other experts in about is sort of the implicit bias that goes into how children are read who have these problems, like a hyperactive child. Black child will be seen as different than a hyperactive white child and may become seen as more punitive or oppositional, and is less than, there's data to back this up, less likely to get an ADHD diagnosis and treatment, whatever that treatment looks like, than a white child in a similar situation. So big issue, huge whole other conversation. But again, it is not a medical diagnosis. That puts the idea that it is contextualized and part of the story, the social story, the community story, that's so important. So I completely agree with the article that the idea of minimizing it states a medical disorder, meds are the fixes. Meds work, but they're really good. They can be well tolerated. They have to be monitored. Of course, growth is a major issue. But they also can make a big difference.
Exactly. And I just thought of another environmental adjustment that could be made readily enough, is classroom furniture. There are the rocky stools, yoga ball. There's rocking chairs, standard they look like a student chair, but they have rockers. There's those, and then there are also, I have in my classroom desks that the height adjusts. It can be a standing desk. It also has whiteboard surface.
Those are great.
Which can be used in classroom for classroom purposes, but also doodling. For the student to doodle during class, if that helps them remain
because that kind of thing does help attention when hits down. You don't have to stop kids from doodling to make them pay attention. Doodling.
And then they can just doodle, erase,
or fidget. Those kinds of things.
So there are some different furniture options that could be helpful, which our students like to have, and just even having different styles of chairs, because different bodies can, feel.
No, absolutely, that's a great point.
And the different, I think the obviously yoga balls, the wobbly stools, those are not, I don't know what they cost, but they're not that expensive.
Those are not major infrastructure investments.
But having a few of those in a classroom can be very helpful.
Yeah, the district I worked for a while was really good about trying to do that, but funding wise, there was only enough funds for like a few standing desks for like the whole building. A big, huge, multi-thousand kid, middle school, and it was a great idea and the intentions were great, but but that's the kind of thing that if you could just have that in every classroom, then you have kids.
All the classrooms don't have all of the things,
but
which is okay too.
More anyway than we.
Which is especially when kids are changing class throughout the day. For elementary, different situation. But at the high school level, kids are changing throughout the day, and so they have their favorites in each room, and that's fine. And you're only there for 45, 50 minutes, which could feel like a long time if you're bored. but they do know, throughout the building there are different setups. And so I think that's helpful, and it was pretty low cost considering overall.
Relatively low cost.
Right.
I remember one of my kids had the difference in I'm thinking of the elementary years, their teachers over the years, that one teacher who stood out as just this wonderful teacher who basically in their classroom, if they needed to walk around during story time, they could walk. If they needed to lay down and just sort of wiggle and worm for different points, like he gave a lot of room for individual sort of ways of moving and being in the classroom. And then as opposed to a different teacher who, just basically was unaccepting of any of that. And it just created so many more problems for learning. So
exactly.
But I love the idea of having just different things available for kids, right? That could work for every kid, for all, many.
Right. And it seems to help quite a few people.
Yeah. And then kids are learning to themselves how to find things that work, right? In that way, they are choosing, and you're helping them say, well, oh, this kind of thing, moving around helps me read better, or taking frequent breaks. I read for 5 minutes, I get up and I walk. I read, I walk. Whatever, we're helping them learn, or but they're then choosing the things that work for them. And that sort of ties back into our conversation about autonomy. How do kids build those internally driven skills to succeed, or whatever that means for them.
Right. Finding, and in fact, that's benchmarks oftentimes in our IEPs is student will identify 3 strategies to enable them to focus, blah, blah, or something like that. We also, every classroom has a bucket of fidgets. Fidget spinners were super popular there for a while, and many people found them distracting. And mostly, those have kind of gone the way of the wild wind. I have, like my bucket has, 10 different things, and they go in phases. Sometimes somebody will go for a thing every day and then they won't touch it for a while, or just on certain days, whatever. But they're there, they're available. Same as doodling.
Yeah, exactly. And we know that those things, for many kids, and identified as ADHD, having ADHD or otherwise, that movement is part of how you pay attention. When you and I are sitting in a boring lecture, you do this 100 times in the lecture, right? That resets your attentional system. So people who are struggling with the attentional system, it's like they're needing that reset, and movement can be part of it. And that's why we don't want to tell kids to stop fidgeting, or moving, because in fact that may be an important part of how they're
but then
coming back to attention.
Couple that with learning to not distract others.
Right.
So
finding ways to do it.
If you're walking around, here's where that works.
Where is it okay? Right.
Yeah. Or if you're sitting on a yoga ball, you can bounce a little bit, but you can't be like.
And that's challenging, right? Because there's plenty of kids that are going to be reinforced when the other kids laugh. The quote unquote sort of class clown version of a child identified or not identified, but with ADHD, and that. So there's a lot of learning, and these aren't sort of magic fixes, but it's a whole set of skills, and sort of involving the bigger picture, flexibility, and identifying while helping to learn it, how you can use it adaptively in a way that's not harmful to you and is respectful of the learning and respectful of other kids. That's all learning curve.
Right, exactly.
But we see it as learning curve, not as do this. If you can't do it, you're misbehaving.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
I know this. I just want to give this one example from early in my career, very early on. I was one of the first adults with ADHD I treated, and this was decades ago, long before as many people had adult ADHD. And this was a guy who had a man or a woman? I think actually it was a woman. Was an accountant and had, struggled with ADHD their whole life and took meds through most of their, academic life. But at that point in their adulthood, they had created all kinds of systems to help manage their executive function. They worked as an accountant, and they were early adopters of tech. They had 2 Palm Pilots and whatever, the early stuff. So they were, and they had 2 secretaries, whatever. They had this whole, so they put in a lot of things in place that they could manage. But then from January to April, during tax time, they always took medication because that was just the next.
Right.
So I always come back to that example, and as an adult, of how that kind of came to work. And it was so informative for me early in my career to see that model. And it just, I think, again, decades ago, kind of coming to this, the idea that it's one or the other, on or off, there or not, is just.
But yeah, that person found the right tool.
Found tools, a whole set of tools, and medicine was just one.
Semi-independently, it sounds like.
Well, we weren't using a lot of this language.
Somebody to write the prescription, but
but all the way.
But most of the year was fine.
And she evolved all these skills kind of on her own. Again, we didn't have this language, executive function coaching or anything like this. Was stuff they kind of, and I picked this person up, in my clinic, right? So I wasn't there for all of that evolution. I just met her when this system was already in place.
Right.
So I don't know how they got to it, but it was long before we were having any of these conversations.
Yeah.
So
good.
So anyway, it's when parents ask me about, well, what can my kid do as an adult? One of the examples I still give.
Right. Good one. Well,
if you have thoughts about this, or bones to pick with us, we would love to hear. And if you're listening and you like what you hear, please hit, at wherever you get your podcasts, hit the like, hit the follow, so you'll download automatically when our new episodes come out. You'll be the first, you'll get it right away. And let us know. Send us feedback. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and if you feel so inclined, write a little 1 or 2 sentence review. That would be super helpful.
Yeah, reviews really help us. Build more people to come to the conversation, which is what we're really hoping we can do. All right, we each need one good thing. We didn't plan.
Oh, well, we kind of did our good thing.
We did our one good thing at the beginning.
We've been spending a day together, a day and a half, and enjoying the lovely spring weather and flowers and birds.
Cats.
And
Kendra and Cassie have.
And Kendra's cats are a hoot.
They are.
So I enjoyed them
and
a lot.
JoJo's the sad, never petted, never fed golden retriever face, but he's a good guy.
Yep.
All right. Well, we'll catch you on the next side, on the next podcast. All right.